Hello, my name is Rob Sandstrom. This is my first YouTube video. I thought I'd take a few minutes to share some experience I had with making a plate for my granddaughter, one of my granddaughters. I have 9 grandchildren. Just trying to share a little information to see if it's useful to others. I'm not a professional YouTuber, and so we'll keep this introduction short. Please keep this in mind. If there are ideas for improving the videos, that will be fine, but I appreciate them being constructive in nature, and I want to enjoy the opportunity to share information I learn as I go, because so many people, such as Mark Lindsay and Laney Shaughnessy, I think his name is, from Spindle TV, Mark Vazalek, and so many others have shared their experience as I've been trying to learn how to do CNC and learn the software that allows that to occur, like Vectric. I hope you pick up a thing or two as you watch it. So for now, let's get started with the video. Okay, we're going to try to make a sunflower plate for my granddaughter who had a special request. So we'll start out by creating a new file. I'll hit Shift, go to Aspire, hit Shift, hit Create a new file. This is going to be a model, I believe, so we're going to go ahead and take it up to a higher resolution, 20 times. I'm going to make the plate, let's say, let's just do 14 by 14 for now, and we'll probably reduce that here. The plate won't be that big. Hit OK. Make it so we can see both. I want some vectors that I can use. So typically it's easier, instead of designing from scratch, I like to go get a something off of Etsy that I can use. So I went to Etsy and I found this sunflower right here. It looks like a pretty simple design. Okay, now I'll import the vector I just loaded. Go to Import Vectors. And I can see the sunflower right there. So we'll go ahead and make this bigger so that it fills up this. It's easier to work with, and then I'll shrink the model down from there. The plates are typically somewhere from 7 to 9 inches. So I'm just going to go ahead for right now, and I'm going to make this whole vector to basically, let's make this 9 inches. That's the bigger direction. Let it stay linked. I'm going to hit Apply, close, and now I'm going to center that vector. I also want to keep everything centered for now. I'll change that later. So let me go back to the setup and center that. Okay. So now we have our vector downloaded. So now the next decision is to know how big I actually want to make the center dish portion. Let's take a look at what we've got here right now. Select this. We'll see that that is about 3 inches wide, 3.5 inches. I would probably like to see that more like about 4.5 or 5 inches. So let me just take a minute and make that bigger and see what it looks like. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go ahead and offset this by, let's say, 1.5 inches. Well, 0.75 inches. Which should give it close to a 5-inch diameter offset. And then I'm going to go ahead and move that to a different layer so that I can keep it separate, and I'll make that the dish bowl layer. Guess I'll color that a different color. Let's make that a, how about a blue color? Close, and let's click on this, and we will see how big that actually is. So it's almost 5 inches. That's a pretty good size kid's plate. I want to move things out of the way as I'm working through this process. So I'm going to go ahead and take this center circle and I'm going to move that to something called Old Bowl. And I'll make that a dark blue. Hit OK. Okay, so we'll start to build our model now. So the first thing is we want to build the base. We want the base of the plate itself to be about 3/16 of an inch. So we're going to go ahead and select the outer vector, which will do the base. It's going to be flat. So we go 3 divided by 16 equals. So we've got the base height at 0.1875. Hit apply. Now we can see the base of our bowl. It's important then to hit start new component or that one will disappear. So the next component we want to build is the rim around here. So that component we want to select this vector and this vector. Hit the shift key, this vector and this vector. We're going to go ahead and select a curved top because we want it to come up and then just be curved at the top. We're going to say the base height of this is about, let's say 0.5. And we want to limit the height to 0.7. And let's give us a little bit of an angle here, say apply. Well, actually, that'll probably look pretty good. We'll see how it looks when we get the leaves on it. So the next one we need to experiment with now is going to be actually how these leaves turn out. So start a new component. Let's try a couple different concepts. Lower that height just a little bit. Yeah, we want that base height to just be right under this lip. Okay, let's try smooth profile, what that looks like. Okay, let's try to add another couple vectors in there to see what that looks like. Okay, let's change those to peak profile. Those just look a little too sharp for me. Try the rounded profile. Those actually don't look too bad, I don't think. We can see this peeking through here. We can fix that vector here in a minute. Let me go work on a couple of these vectors now that we know what that's going to look like. We're not going to save those changes. Hit close. Let's hit delete. Okay, let's go through and clean up some of these holes that'll show up in the plate. So let's look at a couple of these vectors. We're going to cut this vector here. Cut this. What we're going to do is cut this vector here. Cut. Cut. Get rid of this part of the vector. This part of the vector. And we'll close the vector with a smooth curve. It doesn't really have to be that smooth for what we're doing here. Okay, now that we've got all of these leaves, we might find one or two that we need to adjust. We can start pulling the leaves out as part of the fringe of the bowl. So let's start building our components again. Go back to model. We're going to select, let's just select this one initially. We're going to want to merge these with the rest of the model. Yeah, I like these little dimples in here, but it's going to be problematic to have to carve all the way down. So what I want to do is I want to fill in each of these little areas when we look at these to have it so that they're full and just flush with kind of the area that they start to break down into. So that's my next effort. So before I do that, I need to save this. So we've hit apply. We've got it all built here. I'm going to call this petals. And I'm going to go ahead, hit apply. And then so I don't lose everything, I'm going to hit start new component. So that locks what we have here in, and we'll start working on each of these areas. So what we need to do is we need to build a couple vectors that close these off. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to, everywhere where I have this coming out, I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer and copy this petal onto that new layer. So you can see I'm copying each of the petals that actually end up going through, and I'm going to copy to a new layer that I'm going to call Petal Fill. Make that yellow, hit OK, and new layer is visible. Make sure we've got this here, Petal Fill, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to make everything else go away, because, oh, maybe that's not such a good color. Let's try, thought it was cute being yellow, but let's try a different color. Let's try a dark shade of green. Yeah, I can see that better. So we're going to go into there, hit enlarging for a minute, and we're going to modify. We want to modify these vectors so that this section here, the tall section on all of these, is actually its own section. And it might just be easier just to close straight across. So we're going to hit Node, hit Cut Vector, Cut Vector, and we're going to delete everything around it. Hit delete. And then we're going to close this vector. Smooth curve. Node edit. Let me cut this up here so it above where it's going that direction. Delete this section, this section, this section, and we'll close this vector. Go ahead and hit save since we've done a lot of work to this point. Okay, now we need to turn all of these vectors so that they close up this model here. So that's the next step, is closing up these levels so there's not a hole there. So that what we're going to do with that is we're going to go ahead and select these vectors, go back into Create Vectors, and we'll try this at first and see how that looks. Base height 0.45 sounds good. Let's see what happens. maybe a little bit of a negative. Apply. And we need to do merge. We don't want them adding to. Go over here so we can see our model better. So what did that do? That gave us a fill for each of those. Let's make this just a little bigger here. Let's go 0.5. Try that. All right, I like that fill just a little bit better. Eventually we're going to want to do some smoothing in here to smooth that out. But for the most part, I think that looks fairly decent. A little bit popping out here from that little dent and from this little dent. So we'll go back and check the where this is ending. We can see where it's coming out here. So let's just go ahead and move these up just a little bit here. Okay, let's try this again. Just a little more subtle. See this ridge? Let's see if we can get rid of that. There we go. Let's start a new component. Done here. Hit close. Let me rename some of these. Okay, let's try to put a little draft on the inside and outside of this plate. So to prepare for the draft, we're going to go ahead and make copies of each of these original components, duplicates, and move them up to the next level so that we don't destroy our original model and all the work we've put in so far as we're experimenting with drafts and other features. It's common practice to avoid destroying the original work. I don't know, maybe 20% would look good. Let's go up just a little bit more. Yeah, I think I'm liking the look of that one with the 20%. No real sharp turns. Once we apply a smoothing pattern to that, that'll look pretty nice. All right, so we'll turn off the original group. Now we have the model with the 20-degree draft. We're going to duplicate that model so I can add a couple things personalizing it for my granddaughter. All right, so now let's start to personalize this a bit. I also want to make it entertaining for my granddaughter, so I'm going to put a couple eyes and a smile in this sunflower. Go to the drawing tab. Let me turn off the model so it's not. Create a new layer. Put in face. We'll color that, let's say red. Make sure it's selected, face. Okay, we'll start with a couple ovals. Curly subjective. Make this just a little smaller. Work on one eye at a time. Put a couple guides in here to guide me. One on each side of the eyeball. And we'll go ahead and make an arc. Go ahead and do an offset off here, working through my idea. Turn off the guides, are getting in the way. Go ahead and close these vectors with a smooth curve. So far, that's looking good. Okay, I think that looks good. Maybe a little dot in here to make it a little bigger. We'll take and we'll flip this along the job center, create a mirrored copy. All right, now we have the eyeballs. Let's give ourselves a smile. Turn our guides back on. Let's go on each side of the eye here. We'll try this out. Somewhere around there. Okay, so we know that's the line right there. We need to leave room for the name. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and start building the face. I'm going to work on the smile for right now, and using an arc function, we'll go ahead and make a couple arcs, and then we'll join the two together to get a closed vector and see how that looks. You can see we're joining the vectors at this time, checking to make sure we got a closed vector. Now we want to see how this actually looks inside the bowl, and so we're turning on the bowl real quickly just to go ahead and take a look at the proportions, and you'll see that we decide that we need to shrink that down. I'm going to use the percent shrink, leaving everything X to about 80% of the actual size it started with, and that will give us a nice proportion inside of the bowl. So that's what you see me doing here, is looking at what it looks like inside the bowl after I've shrunk this down. I do have this, as you can tell, on fast speed a little bit to try to shorten the video. We'll see. Any feedback on whether this is concerning to you or not, let me know in the comment section so I know whether this is a good practice or not. At this point, I'm going through and I'm going to experiment with some different shapes, both round shapes and other shapes for the face, to see how they look. The base height was really too much at that point. You could see how far it was sticking out. So now I'm adjusting the base height down to allow it to look a little different. And you'll see me play with this for a little while, trying to get the right shape. Obviously that was too high, so we're going to reduce that down to, I first go down to 0.125, and that's too much, and now I go down to 0.1. You can see that happening over there on the actual area where we change the height. I actually kind of like what that looks like, and now I'm just going to play for a little bit more. I'm just looking at the shape of the eye to see how that looks. Point one is okay to me. I'm continuing to just look at it and experiment a little. I settle in on the rounded shape, and for the most part I think that looks pretty good. So now I have something to work with as we move forward. So I want to put some fillets on here. Let's see, I decided I really didn't like the corners being as square as they were. Kind of looked kind of creepy to me, like a Jack-in-the-Box commercial jackhead. So I went ahead and changed it and put some fillets, as you saw, around the corners of the mouth, just to make them so that they weren't so pointy on the edge, thinking that would look better. I see the eyes have got a little bulge there underneath, and I'll take care of that later with some smoothing techniques on the individual eyeballs, along with some other areas that I'll smooth, like her name, after I put her name in place. Later in the video you'll see me smoothing, and then once we have the model completely built, we'll do a smoothing on the whole model to make everything carve nicer. Right now I kind of like the look of that before I actually do the smoothing. So now we want to put in the name, so I'm getting ready to put in the name like we would any other text, and that name will then be located between the eyes and the mouth. The hard part in getting a name or any other text is always picking the right font. I actually did some experimentation, which I took out of here and jumped to this font. So I'd actually looked at a couple different fonts before I actually picked this one. This is the one that I ended up on. It's called Script MT Bold, as you can see. And I'm just centering the name in a good location. And we'll take a look at how this looks when I go ahead and make it a model. But first thing I need to do is weld it. So I'm using the weld function. It says to replace or keep. So you'll see I kept the original just because if something messed up I wanted to have it, and then I will not use it for the actual model, but it's there if I need it. So the first thing I do is just come up with a flat raise, but that doesn't give me the result I wanted, so I changed it to a smooth. And at this point I'm experimenting with various different types of effects for the name being raised. That's the typical modeling process I use. Is it's a lot of trial and error. I think something will look good, so that I'll try it, move it up, move it down, decide what I want to do until I finally settle on what I like. So now we're going to go ahead and continue to work with the model and play with this name until I get it just what I like. All you see me doing there on the left side is adjusting various angles to try to figure out what angle I think looks best. One of the things I'm looking at the moment are the areas right underneath this, around this name. You can see them bulging a little bit. I'm trying to figure out how to reduce those bulges that you're seeing me point to right there. And so I'm playing a little bit. I notice they're there, so I go ahead and hit apply, hit start new component to make sure that that component is saved, and then I'll move into looking at how to make those look a little bit better. So first I want to name the component to make sure I keep everything organized as I'm building the model. Otherwise I'm going to have a tendency to not remember what a component is. At this point I'm looking at those bumps and saying, what do I want to do with those? And so I'm getting a closer look at the bumps, and you'll see what I want to do is actually start to use the smoothing tool to be able to adjust those. So you click on that, looks like a pin up there, the smoothing tool, collect smoothing. And again, for me, these tools are just a matter of trial and error. I'll do a lot of undos at different times. So there is no magic set that I've found so far. Maybe somebody has one and they can discuss that in the comment section. But what I'm doing here is I'm using the smoothing tool to go around and try to take out some of those bumps in the name where the original text was welded as it got turned into curves. Has a tendency to do that. I've noticed that on other modeling jobs. So just kind of taking some time to make it look a little smoother. Again, it's a personal taste kind of thing, and it's just experimentation. So we're just continuing to do a little more smoothing now on the eyes. So we did the name, now we want to do the eyes and see if we can smooth those little bumps out there right at the bottom where the two vectors joined. That's what happens. As I said, it's experimentation and it's one step trial at a time. And now we've got the plate, and I'm thinking that I'm liking that pretty well at this point in time. Doing some last checks to see if there needs to be any smoothing there with the pupils. I'm actually going to decide to make the pupils rise a little. I didn't like the way they just joined and were real flat. They kind of looked vacant, like a vacant stare to me. So now what I'm doing is actually taking the pupils and going to experiment again with those with a little bit of shape. You can see I'm pulling them out slightly, and that's what this next section is me experimenting with the pupils to get those to the point that they look like I like them. Once again, now that I have them, it's hitting naming them as pupils so I don't lose track of them. We're now at the point where we want to apply smoothing to our model to allow us to have a nicer finishing toolpath when we're getting done. So the first thing we need to do is create a new level so that we can preserve the work from our previous levels. You've seen this before. So we will go ahead and select each of these parts of our model. We will duplicate them. Move the duplicated components to the next level. Turn off the original components so we don't end up stacking on each other. And now we'll want to smooth the model by using the smoothing tool up above. This component must be baked before editing, so we will hit OK. So now we'll apply smoothing here. Let's see, somewhere around the middle or so. Let's open up this larger so we can see it. Looks pretty good. Maybe just a little more. This is all a personal taste, trial and error. Okay, I actually think that looks pretty good. I think that'll carve well. There's no great big tool areas, I think. I think it can go up and down. Hit OK. Now that we've got a smooth model, we'll go ahead and set up our toolpaths. In preparation for setting up our toolpaths, one of the things we want to do is carve all the way down through the bottom. Let's go back to both views. So we'll want our tool bit will want to come down. We're going to use a 1/4 inch ball nose. So let's go ahead and set a offset vector that we can go out to with our setting up our boundaries. About 0.3 looks good outwards. Close. Now we're ready to set up our toolpaths. So the first toolpath we want to set up is our roughing toolpath. And we're going to go ahead and do that with a 1/4 inch ball nose. We're going to go out to the selected vectors. That's why we just made this vector. We don't need a boundary offset since we've already incorporated that basically. Machining allowance 0.02. We want to do a raster with the wood grain, which is going to go up and down. That's going to be 90 degrees. Everything else looks good. We'll calculate that toolpath. Let's preview what it looks like. Okay, let's take a look at what those two look like. Preview visible toolpath. That looks pretty good. Actually, I think if we blow that up, looks pretty good to me. Next thing we want to do, let's go back to the two modes. We want to actually incorporate some tabs so that we can carve this thing without it breaking out away from the wood since we're going through. So we're going to go to clip art. Got our model here. We've got this here. Let's go ahead and grab some pre-selected tabs. Let's put one right here. And we'll put another one, say right here. Another one down here, a little bit away from that boundary. One more right here. And that should probably do it, but for safety, we'll go ahead and put one right here. And we'll take and rotate that slightly. And you can see these tabs are now located to hold the piece in place. So the next step then, after we put the tabs in, is to go ahead and see what they look like as we do the tooling again. We're going to go ahead and recalculate all. Since we actually put the tabs in, it now needs to take into account the tabs. Okay, let's look at the first toolpath. Reset it. Preview. Blow that up so we can get a good look at it. Not too bad for the finishing, for the roughing toolpath. Do our first pass with our 1/8 inch ball nose. That would probably be pretty good by itself, but there's still some areas in here and over in here. Let's see if the 1/16 inch finishing bit gets those cleaned up. You can see that it's going to go around the edges here, so. Sure enough, look at that, it cleaned those up. Let's hope we get that result when we actually carve this plate. This is a plate for my granddaughter, who asked me for a sunflower plate. I was glad I could be able to do it. I hope that this has helped some people. It's been a very long video. It was my first YouTube video ever. I think I said that at the beginning of the video. It's not the most professionally done with the editing and the sound in the background and so forth. Future videos will get better as I learn more. But my ultimate goal was to share something that I learned with others in the event that it may be helpful to somebody else. If you like what you see, I will try to make some future videos, including the carve of this plate. So if you do like it, go ahead and do what they always say in YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe, like, share, and comment as appropriate. I would appreciate your comments to be more constructive and not be worried about the fact that I've got some background grandkids in the making noise and some other editing features that weren't quite as smooth as we'd like them to be. Those will improve in the future. I would appreciate the comments to be more straightforward and or asking questions that I might be able to help answer. I don't profess to be an Aspire expert. I am learning as I go and sharing what I learn.